And so, again, I want to introduce Lee. We worked together. He was my student, and he graduated from New Hampshire in 1974. He holds an honorary doctorate from the University of New Hampshire. And I remember very well talking with Lee, and Lee was majoring in mathematics and electrical engineering. And Lee telling me that he thought going to graduate school that'd be interesting, but he really wanted to go to medical school. And he wanted to become a doctor. And so I remember calling Dartmouth because I thought, well, maybe we could get him into a New Hampshire institution because he's from UNH. And I chatted with Dartmouth, and they said, well, how much chemistry is that? I said, well, not very much. And how much biology? Well, not very much. He's an electrical engineering mathematics major. And they said, well, I don't think so. But we continued to pursue that, and I believe it was Albert Einstein. And so Lee went down to New York, and without much chemistry, decided to get a master's in biochemistry. And then he got an MD and graduate work in PhD also, MD, PhD. And then joined the Navy, did a variety of things in the Navy, which he could talk to us about. At one stage, he was posted to Huntsville, Alabama, and because he didn't really have enough to do, even though he was engaged full-time, he decided to get a master's in public health on the side. And then, was it last year or the year before? A couple of years back, man who's now a great-grandfather, but probably a couple of years back, I'm not sure his great-grandfather, but a grandfather, he decides, because he doesn't have enough to do, and he's near Houston, why not get a master's in physics, and particularly in plasma. So 3 masters, PhD, doctorate, numerous awards. And I think the reason that we're particularly delighted that Lee is with us is he's had the opportunity to go to space, to go to space station, to go outside of space station and have the opportunity to, as a human being, to look down at the Earth from space. So this is a very great pleasure for me to have a great friend, a great student with us today. So Lee, Morin.
I want to start off with a discussion about the trip I took to space in 2002 to help build the International Space Station. First, let me just say that everything that humans do starts with a fantasy and an idea. And some of the greatest places to see ideas and fantasies are in children's books. And this is a children's book from the 1950s. And if you're in my generation, you were probably given books like this about space stations. And if you look at this, you can see the bicycle wheel concept that was thought of in the 20s to give us synthetic gravity. We don't really know how to make space stations like this yet because they're very big engineering challenges to doing that, but one day we probably will do that to give us that gravity. And this was actually published before Sputnik. And so it's an artist's concept of what the Earth looked like. And you can look down and see the clouds. And so we can look at, that was the fantasy, and we'll compare that to the reality in a couple of slides ahead. This was from a movie that was by the late, great Stanley Kubrick, 2001 Space Odyssey, that still has a freshness, unlike many science fiction movies that become stale. This one is still very good, so I would go get this if you haven't seen it yet. But in it, there's a scene of a space shuttle-like vehicle docking to a space station under construction. It was set in the future. At that time, I was actually I was in Dr. Moore's class taking Calculus 5 and 6, I think, at the time, when this was up in the local theater. And I never thought that I would actually be in a shuttle-like vehicle docking to a space station under construction in the year 2002. I would have never have believed that. That's the way the space station looked at when we docked to it. Actually, after we just left, there's a, can follow the mouse. This section right here was the piece that we took up. That's the S0 truss. If you look up here, there's a KU antenna, very similar frequency band to the ones for the satellite dishes many of you may have behind your houses or on your roofs. Another object here is this V-shaped structure, is the robotic arm, SSRMS. Some more to say about that, but I was on the end of this arm for almost 7 hours one glorious afternoon, April 2002, and I'll tell you about that. If you look on the back, you can see the Progress vehicle, the Russian unmanned cargo mission, and down here is the Soyuz, which serves as the lifeboat for the 3 crew that were on board before we went there. And we took up this S0 truss and bolted it on, and that we'll tell you about that process. So that's the space station, the way it looks at assembly complete. Although this is an artist's conception that was done at the time, there are pictures you can see online that look very much like this. The solar arrays, there are now 4 of them instead of the 1. And the truss is here, so you can see the full length of the truss. 360 feet, so it's a football field, including the end zones. Of course, you can't take up a thing that big onto the space shuttle. We took up a chunk that was 43 feet long. Space shuttle payload bay is a little over 60 feet long, but they had an airlock in there to dock to the space station, so it left 43 feet for the S0 truss and all the other structures. And I'll talk in a minute about how that was built. Going back to this Kubrick movie, there's a scene in there that I won't get into, but this involved robotics and the crews inside operating these arms, and that still is our concept of the robotics in space. So that was the fantasy. Here's the reality, the close-up of the SSRMS, robotic manipulating system, which made it possible to build this space station. This actually is built by the Canadians. I'll show you a picture of that later. The robots on the space shuttle and the space station were built by the Canadians, and that was their contribution. That same concern in Canada also built the landers for the lunar lander. The LEM had the dishes, and the famous pictures looking down after the landing as Neil Armstrong was going down those, you can see the footpad down there on the base of the moon, and those were also built. That landing gear was built by the same company. The Canadian astronauts, will remind you, the first feet on the moon were Canadian. So. Now, there's another thing here I want to point out. First of all, the blackness of space. It's so bright in space that you don't see stars with your naked eye. They're obviously there, but you don't have the contrast. So it really makes it the blackest black you can imagine. And it really makes you feel, when you look at that, it's really kind of terrifying, because it feels like you could disappear into an infinite pool of black ink, and you could. Another thing looking down here is at the altitude we're at, which is 240 nautical miles, the horizon is 1,500 miles away. So if you were over Oklahoma, if you looked one side, the horizon would be at the East Coast, Atlantic, and the other way it would be the Pacific. So you don't see the U.S. from this altitude. You do see things like Cape Cod in Florida, the Great Lakes. You can see that size geographic structure. But as you look out 1,500 miles, you see there's this blue line. And you can take a pair of 7x50 binoculars that we have on board and look out there at that, and you will actually see lines. In fact, even with your bare eye, you can see lines. And it starts off with a bright blue, and as you look up, it'll be striated. And each striation is a little bit darker, and a darker blue, and then an indigo, and then a little bit fuzzy, and then it goes into this black void. That's our atmosphere. The part that's thick enough to breathe is only about 2 miles. If you compare the thickness of that atmosphere to the size of the sphere of the Earth, it's like comparing the skin of a soap bubble, a kid's soap bubble, to the size of the soap bubble. We will spend our lives in that atmosphere. The dinosaurs spent their lives in the same atmosphere. And when you're looking down from space and you look down at the Earth, the view is very, very clear. And you can see remarkable things, remarkable detail. You can see large ocean waves. You can see ocean liners with a wake behind them. You can see jetliners, the contrails. You can look down and you can see bridges. And I'm going to show you some stuff about the Earth at night. You really see the works of man. But one thing that really struck me, and people have asked me, what surprised you that went beyond your training in space? And one of the things was how fragile the atmosphere looked from space. And I served on a Trident submarine, so I was out of that atmosphere for about 2 weeks. And I was on the shuttle for 11 days, so I was out of the atmosphere then for about 11 days. But the rest of the time, and for everyone else, we're in that atmosphere, and we share it. And it's important to keep that in mind. This is the S-Zero truss, a large structure. It has a hexagon in cross-section. That was our mission patch, was a hexagon to celebrate that cross-section. There was this was built by the Boeing company. They had a large facility in Houston. When I was an astronaut candidate, I was able to work there as a technical assignment. And in the lobby, they had a rib, the same way you'd have like a cross-section of a ship, and you'd see like a sailboat, what the cross-section looks like. Well, they had a cross-section of this S-Zero truss, which was a main section of this whole thing that they were building for NASA, up on the wall. And you see the gird of the cross-section. I remember walking by that every day. I never thought that I would be one of the 4 guys to bolt it on several years later. There's a train down the middle. If you look closely, it looks like train tracks. And this box right here is a small train. It's the first train in space, and it moves up and down these tracks. And that actually is the base of the robot arm, also built by the Canadians, mobile transporter. And so you saw that arm in the V, and it reached into the shuttle payload bay and grabbed the S-Zero and pulled it out and then positioned it. That's great for the first piece. What do you do with the next piece? So the next piece, that end that had pulled out the S-Zero truss that you can see down here at the bottom, suspending it, that then grabs onto this structure, and the other end lets go like an inchworm, and it trades loose ends. And then that next one reaches down on a later mission, grabs the next piece, and pulls it up, and then the train moves. And then that arm positions it out here on the end, and that gets bolted on. And piece by piece, that's how you build these large structures in space. And that train moves at about 1 inch a minute. But it is the fastest train in space. And if you look closely, occasionally you can look down and see the Earth below. And this is actually over the Sahara Desert and the country Egypt. And down here you can see this is not a shadow of this. This is actually the Nile River. And you see the green vegetation from the Nile, water from the Nile River going up to the Mediterranean here. 10 minutes later, we were over northern Siberia. 10 minutes, you move 3,000 miles. We crossed the Atlantic Ocean. 10 minutes. You come over the horizon. You go up, as you traverse the United States, you come up across Mexico, and you see Houston, and you can grab those binoculars, you can find your house, but you got to be quick, because all of a sudden the scene goes gray on you because your binoculars are moved off the window and they're looking at the wall, because you're moving 5 miles a second. And the next thing, you pick up Mobile, Alabama. You look down and you can see the twin bridges across Mobile Bay. You can see the battleship there next to the bridges. And the next thing you pick up Pensacola, and then Jacksonville, where my children and grandchildren live. And next thing you're going up the East Coast and you see North Carolina. And then you go up and you see the nation's capital. And you can look down and see the monuments there. And the next thing you see New York City. And then you see Cape Cod and Boston. And then you go up into the maritime provinces of Canada, which seemed like they went on, it seemed like farther than, from Boston to the end of Canada seemed farther than Florida to Boston. You know, it was surprising. I didn't quite understand how much there was up there. And then you get out over the ocean, and then you see Ireland coming in. And that trip across the Atlantic took 10 minutes. And I had a distant relative, a woman who left France in 1673. She was orphaned. Her parents were killed by the plague. This was the same time that Newton was inventing the calculus. And she was recruited, she and 1,000 other women were recruited by the King of Spain to have women go to Canada because they wanted it to be a permanent colony, and it wasn't going to happen without women and children and families. And they recruited 1,000 women. They were called the Daughters of the King. And each one of them got a steamer trunk with pots and pans and 1,000 pins and 100 needles and thread and scissors and pots and pans and 50 golden guineas to buy a little cabin. And each one of them had that dowry from the king, and they went to Quebec. And she married a soldier called Pierre Morin. That was my 12th power great-grandmother. And that trip across the Atlantic took her 2 months. And the women that participated, 20% of them died on the trip. And I made the trip going the other way in 10 minutes. So it's really ironic how history moves. S0 truss, there's a structure here, this triangle is called a keel pin. It's a keel pin because this goes down into the belly of the payload bay of the shuttle, and it's supported on these 6 points. The keel pin, and this thing is called a trunnion pin. The trunnion pin, if you think of the old-time cannons in the pirate ships, they got those spikes out of the barrel, and it's in a carriage. Those are trunnion pins. NASA appropriated that technology without paying any license fees to the pirates and installed it here and on the other side, as well as here on the keel pin. But the problem with this keel pin is that it is in the way of the train tracks. So one of the jobs we had in terms of installing the S0 truss was to remove these keel pins. And I'm telling you about that in great detail. You'll see why in a little while. So the next thing I want to tell you about is the fantasy of spacewalking. This was back, we have an economic marker here, when comic books, the elementary schools I talk to can relate to comic books costing 10 cents. They cost more than that today. And this was actually when the first Disneyland, again before Sputnik, but Tomorrowland, and they were talking about doing EVA and spacewalking. So that was the fantasy. This was the reality. Here is my partner, Jerry Ross. This was his 7th mission, which set a U.S. record, with his rookie partner here. And I'm on the end of the arm. And one thing that you can do is after the arm is done in holding the truss and the truss is bolted on, there's a foot plate, and you can lock your feet into that foot plate, and then the arm can move you around, kind of like a cherry picker in 3 dimensions. And that's when I was saying I was on the end of the arm. And now we're coming in, and Jerry's been unbolting it, and I'm going to grab this keel pin, and then the arm is going to move 400 degrees and come all the way around underneath the space station, and then that's going to be installed at another place on the space station to balance the weight. Before I leave this picture, though, I want to tell you this picture represents a first for the United States of America in the space program. This is the first all-grandfather spacewalking team. And we became known as the Silver Team, and there was a popular movie called Space Cowboys that came out at the same time about older astronauts. So the Space Cowboy Silver Team hit headlines around the world. It was in the Berlin papers about the Silver Commando, and it was in the Calcutta papers and the Swedish papers and other places. So here you can see him on the end of this arm, grabbing some of the, this is called the drag link, and so it provides side support for the keel pin, and that has to be stowed too. You can see on the back, this is the backpack that provides the life support. This spacesuit is really a small spaceship. It has navigation, it has radio comm, it has propulsion, it has life support. It costs as much as one of our T-38s. America has 13 of these spacesuits altogether. And the arms and legs adjust in size for different size people. It also has an emergency rocket belt that gives you 10 feet per second of delta V so that you can navigate back to the space station if you should be so unfortunate as to fall off or let go. Orbital mechanics will pull you away, and you would like to get back, or you will become very famous. And there's one thing they tell you as a student astronaut: don't get famous. You learn how do you think you learn how to fly that? What you do is virtual reality, and it is quite an adventure. And they throw you off the space station, and you have the helmet on and the model of the space station, and that is receding in front of your eyes. And you pull out this control thing, and you turn it on, and it's like the Game Boy, and you have to fly it back. In the same way, carrier pilots or airline pilots have to do requalifications every month. When you're in this flow, you have to go requalify and do that rescue every month. And it's the last thing you do at the Johnson Space Center before you fly down to the Cape to launch. Anyway, that's the EVA. So here I am on the end of the arm coming in to grab this S0 truss. You can see the Canada down here. Grabbing the S0 truss on the end of the arm. And you can see it coming around. Of course, the shuttle was docked down here, but coming around the space station to mount the thing right up here. So there's Lee's got the end of the arm. Coming around this arm, we call this the hi-ya maneuver, being on the end of the arm and following that around. We had the honor of being invited to the White House, to the Oval Office and the Rose Garden, and meeting the president. And we were in our blue flight suits, and we had a stack of 8x10 color glossy photographs with circles and arrows on the back of each one that we shared our mission with the president. And the president really oohed and awed at this picture. And I am so proud that the president liked my picture the best. Clearly because I am so handsome. There's a close-up of the picture, and here you can see Canada. And this is a picture that was taken during the flight by my fellow Navy captain, Steve Frick, out the side window of Atlantis. And this picture has a lot of action in it, and this was sent to the ground electronically and made headlines. This was on the Cleveland paper above the fold. It was in the Florida papers, and that was my 15 minutes of fame. If you look closely, I really love this picture because it makes me look like I had big arms. But you can see I had a camera here on my chest, and I snapped a picture, and in the next slide you'll see what I was looking at. And I was actually looking, there was where the picture was taken, and you can see the Atlantis, looks like the nose of an airplane. But this is the window through which that picture was taken. Here's my partner Jerry Ross on the S0 truss against the void of space, and as we helped install that. It's held on with 30 bolts and 4 tripods. I personally tightened 12 of those 30 bolts. The bolts looked like the bolts that would hold a tire on a truck. We had a big torque wrench, tightened it to 50 foot-pounds of torque. And I personally tightened 12 of those bolts. That's 2 years of education per bolt. Here's our crew, 1 Russian, Yuri, and 9 Americans. It's interesting, Yuri was a MiG-29 pilot based on one side of the Fulda Gap in Germany. Mike Bloomfield, F-15 pilot on the other side. And here, he's the station commander, shuttle commander in space. Ellen Ochoa is our current JSC, Johnson Space Center, director. And Jerry Ross, who I did the EVAs with, and Steve Frick, who took our pictures, and the others. This is actually very tricky to do this picture, because this is kind of like, you go in school and you stand on the stairs in front of the building and you have your picture taken, right? Wrong. You're in microgravity and you're floating around. And so it's a matter of everyone sort of holding on and making it look good, and then Yuri going out there and setting the timer on the camera, and we're all waiting, and then bang, we get a picture. That picture, we printed it out on board, and it goes into a book. The ship's log, a naval tradition started by Captain Bill Shepard. Ship's bell to bell, be ring on board. Ship's log. That page with that picture went in there, and the two, everyone there, or the two commanders wrote a paragraph describing what was going on, and we all signed it. And so I'm very honored that I signed this book, one of the many, many people who have signed it who visited the space station. But I often think this is a book where 16 nations came together in peace to do the largest international engineering project ever done, to further our reach out into space. Where will this book be in 1,000 years? Maybe in the library upstairs, next to Galileo. There's the space station, and looking at it, this was actually a picture taken from, I believe it was 8 miles away with a very long 800 millimeter lens. And it really struck me that it reminded me of biology class in the junior high school when I was looking through at a hydra swimming, a little creature swimming in a pool, a black pool. And that's what this is, a little drop of life budding off of this planet. Just the very beginning, against the void of space. Just a quick story. We were in quarantine. You go into quarantine the week before you fly down at the Kennedy Space Center. And we had a delay, and our flight slid from Thursday to the following Monday. And since my wife and I don't have young children in the house, she was able to come into quarantine and be with me. And we went to a place called the Beach House, which is a conference center, and during launches it's reserved for the astronauts. And we're waiting for our flight. We're fully trained, so the idea is to relax. And we went to the Beach House, a very private beach. And we are on this beach, and we decided we're going to walk up the beach. We're going to go walk up 4 miles in the sand. Nice long walk. Want to be nice and tired. Don't want to have to take sleeping pills to go to sleep because you're so, kind of like the night before Christmas, with the kids. It's that way for astronauts, so you want to be nice and fatigued so you can have a good natural sleep. Walk 4 miles up in the sand, and a very private beach, except for the guys with the machine guns who check their IDs every so often. But other than that, we were alone, and we walked up and we saw the Atlantis right there on the coast, and they were working on it, getting it ready, making the last-minute repairs. And we turn around and walk back, and I look down and I find this bottle there in the sand. And something about astronauts finding bottles in the sand on Cocoa Beach. My wife says, if a blonde jumps out of this bottle, you're in so much trouble. And we look at this bottle, and in there's a note. There's a cork in the bottle, and there's a note. And the note says, this bottle was thrown into the ocean off the coast of Maine 2 years before. When you find this bottle, email me and tell me where you found it. So when I got to the space station, I sent them the email. I want to shift gears now and tell you a little bit about Orion, which is where we're going in the future. Now, I want to go through this kind of quick. Orion multipurpose crew vehicle, an exploration vehicle we're building now. For the last 10 years, I've been leading the team that's building the cockpit for this vehicle. We have a couple of videos that aren't working. We'll come back and play them in a minute. Deep space exploration vehicle. And it's a capsule, uses the same geometry as Apollo. Apollo was 3.4 meters, this is 5 meters, so it's bigger than Apollo. Has this wine glass shaped structure to protect it, and this is a launch abort system. Launch abort system will pull the crew away from the stack. And then there's a service module. This is actually being built by the European Space Agency. So that's the Apollo spacecraft overview. Just some pictures of the Apollo under construction in Denver and other places. Just a picture of the stack where you can see it, different configurations during the acoustic testing. Here you can see inside the people inside looking up at the cockpit working the displays. So these displays are what my laboratory is providing the software for in collaboration with Lockheed Martin Company. Also testing in the water, the thing could end up upside down. It's probably 50-50 whether it lands this way or right side up. So it has these big beach ball things that are inflated with helium and flipped up to uprighting bags. So that's a test of that. This swimming pool is the world's largest indoor pool, 6.2 million gallons, the same amount of water that the reflecting pool in Washington, D.C. has, 40 feet deep. And it has full-size mock-ups of the space station and the space shuttle and the Hubble telescope as needed. And that's where I learned how to do spacewalks, in that pool. But they use it for other things like this. Here's just some pictures of the Orion being manufactured. And we'll show you a video of this. This is friction stir welding. And these will be better. I'll run these video clips for you. This is a picture of Life magazine from 51 years ago today. 25 September 1964, America's giant leap into space. And I brought this up here so I could show you right where the beach house is, which was right here. But also to show you these pads. The Orion is launching from the complex down here. These were where we launched from the shuttle, was up here. So this is the investment we made in 1964 is still in use today. First test was done last December. I'll show you a little short video of it, but just to describe it, this was the first test of the Orion spacecraft unmanned. Did 2 orbits, including a high altitude orbit up to about 3,600 nautical miles. And so it could come in fast to test the heat shield. Space shuttle, the space shuttle flew up to low Earth orbit. The velocity was about 25,000 feet per second, or Mach 25. When you fly Mach 25, you get a patch like this to commemorate that. That's what this patch is on my chest. If you're coming in from deep space or from the moon, you're going to be going much faster than that. The Apollo astronauts, the fastest was Tom Stafford's mission, Mach 43. And you've got to have the heat shield soak up that heat because you don't have the energy to stop and go into low Earth orbit. You might be able to skip once, but either you're going to skip out or you're going to be re-entering right then. So you're not going into low Earth orbit. And so you've got to soak up that heat. So the heat shield needs to be a lot more robust. Another test that will be coming up in the years ahead. And I want to show you this. This is the next mission, EM1. So this is a man-capable vehicle, but it'll have an unmanned test flight, and basically will go out around the moon, similar to the Apollo 8 mission, and come back. This will probably be 2017. EM2, this will be the first manned flight. We'll do a similar thing, except it will go into a lunar orbit and come back. And this is going to be a real challenge. There's a lot going on with this, and we're working on this hard. A new rocket is being built for this near New Orleans, the SLS, Space Launch System. This will be the world's largest rocket. It'll be larger than Saturn. Has 2 5-segment solid rocket boosters, and we will reuse 4 Space Shuttle main engines on the bottom, and eventually 5. We have 16. Space Shuttle main engine is a $50 million ticket. It was designed to fly 100 times. It's got a lot of redundancy in it. We are going to use the 16 we have left for 4 of these boosters, and then they'll build another rocket, which will be cheaper. But we have these, so we'll use them. We can fly them at 109% performance because we don't have to reuse them. Shuttle went off 104%. You had 109% in an emergency. So this is basically returning to the core mission. So what I'd like to do now is just play you a couple short videos. And we will go into the, since I'm an amateur machinist, I have to show you this. This is friction stir welding, which has replaced plasma arc welding for manufacturing space structures. You can go ahead and close that. Friction stir welding actually stirs the aluminum together with friction without melting it. And that means that you don't lose the temper. Aluminum is real tricky to temper. And it's real important with how it behaves. And so if you can weld it without melting it, you don't lose the temper properties. And that's how spacecraft are assembled now, by friction stir welding. Next thing is we'll look at the EFT-1 mission. Again, so this mission successfully flew. And again, unmanned. We had a telemetry feed into our lab. So I watched this mission from the control panel that we're building that had live telemetry as if I was on board. I could see the events happening. So this is going 10 times further away from Earth than shuttle ever did. Jettison the service module and separate. And this is the view out the window. Now you got to take out that velocity, and you do it with the friction. And you get that plasma about 20,000 degrees. So that's jettisoning the forward bay cover, deploying the drogues at 23,000 feet. Slows you down from 700 to 350 feet per second. You're really moving. Deploy the mains. At first they look like hot air balloons, and then they disreef and open up. Land in the Pacific near San Clemente Island in the Pacific, off of California. So just to tell you a little story, you saw how that stuff, all this stuff is coming off. There's 23 things that come off the vehicle. We test that at the Yuma test range, which is an Army parachute range in Arizona. And we've done over 10 tests. And we had a student from OU who came and worked at our lab for a year, and he developed a piece of software that is an essential part of that testing, which is a laptop that keeps track of all that debris and shows the aircrew flying the helicopter where that stuff is, so that they can get close to get the best pictures during the reentry, but not too close and be hit by that debris. That's a debris tool, and we use it on all of the tests, and when the Navy saw it, they said, you will have that on our aircraft carrier when we land in San Clemente, and it'll be on our Navy helicopters. And so I had two of my engineers went through the Navy water survival training so that they could fly as aircrew and operate that instrument. But that was developed by an OU student in our lab. And the next thing I would like to do and kind of close with before we go into the questions, I have a couple of short videos here. And maybe we could drop the lights here. I think these might be a little more effective. These are a couple of short clips from space. This is the aurora from space. You're looking down at the aurora. The red is an oxygen line, and green is nitrogen. These videos I'm showing you now were taken by Don Pettit, who's another astronaut and very creative guy and a fellow classmate. This is another video Don made with time-lapse photography of one day on the space station. And you can, it's a frame every 15 seconds through a day pass. So you can see how fast the KU is moving. So this is the time-lapse photography. So you can see the solar rays tracking the sun as the space station goes around the Earth. Next, I want to show you a short clip of what a rendezvous is like in space stations. This is the STS-126 rendezvous flown by Captain Chris Ferguson, who later flew the final STS-135 mission. Video both from on shuttle and on the station. The big thing here is inspecting the tiles. That's why we didn't do the somersault on my flight. That was a post-Columbia safety. Looking for any holes in the tiles, and they had ways of patching them. That's right. That's exactly right. You can see the reflections of the crew off the glass of the windows.
Capture light. Beautiful. On the Bigler, capture confirmed.
Capture confirmed. That's a good thing. And finally, I want to show you cities at night. And this is narrated by Don. Don is a guy who he would be the guy I would say is closest to Galileo, because this guy is very creative and he finds science to do with wherever he is.
Cities at Night, an orbital tour around the world. Cities at night are strikingly beautiful from an orbital vantage. As members of Expedition 6 to the International Space Station, we attempted to record these images with our digital still cameras and failed. The images were blurred due to the rather swift pace of orbital motion coupled with the required time exposures. However, we managed to assemble a tracking system from spare parts on Space Station that amateur astronomers will recognize as a barn door tracker. Using this tracking system, we were able to manually cancel orbital motion and obtain for the first time truly sharp images of cities from space. Here is Montreal, our best attempt at a handheld image. And here is Montreal taken from our orbital improvised tracking system, where detail is now seen down to about 60 meters. Available from the internet, we are used to seeing images of the world at night from the DMSP satellite system. These images are only in black and white and are limited in detail to objects 2 miles across, as seen in this mosaic along the east coast of the United States. And here is a similar mosaic made from our images taken from Space Station. where we can zoom down in Google Earth style with full color to 60-meter resolution. Now we are ready to take an orbital tour around the world of cities at night. Zurich, Switzerland. Milan, Italy. Madrid, Spain. Cities at night are caught in a triangle between culture, geography, and technology. Athens, Greece. Antwerp, Belgium. Cities in Europe display a characteristic network of roads that radiate outwards like glowing spider webs. London, with a tour down the English coast to Bristol. Cairo, Egypt, with the Nile River seen as a dark shape running south to north. The pyramids of Giza are well lit at night and visible as 3 spots in the center. A journey up the Nile brings us to the Big Bend, past Quina and Luxor, where the Valley of the Kings is peacefully dark. Tel Aviv, on the left, Jerusalem on the right. Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. Showing multicolors, the cities in the Middle East are strikingly beautiful from space. Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, with the road winding eastward towards Mecca. And here is Mecca, seen from space at night. Abu Dhabi, United Arab Emirates. Oil field fires near Kuwait City. The northwest coast of India. India has a unique orbital signature where a multitude of small village lights are scattered over the continent, diffusely seen as if masked by a veil. Karachi, Pakistan. Manila, Philippines, where its geometry is dictated by waterfronts. Rangoon, Myanmar, with a skip of moonlight reflecting off the water. Hong Kong. Here is a mosaic moving from the southeast tip of South Korea near Busan to the north Kyushu coast of Japan near Fukuoka City. Midway in the Korea Strait is a fleet of fishing boats luring their catch with intense xenon lights, appearing as unfamiliar members of the zodiac. Tokyo, Japan. The cities in Japan have a distinct blue-green cast. From this, one can immediately recognize that your orbit is over Japan. Nagoya. Brisbane, Australia, moving down the coast to Cape Byron. The fabled Alice Springs. and more remote Air Lake by moonlight, showing only a few dots of humanity. Sao Paulo, Brazil, where the older part of town is seen in blue-green from mercury vapor lighting, and the newer boroughs are yellow-orange from sodium vapor lighting. The coastal city of São Vicente comes into view. Mexico City. El Paso, Texas, and Juarez, Mexico, an example in one area that shows the imprint of culture on the display of lighting at night. Phoenix, Arizona, which characterizes western U.S. cities with a north-south, east-west grid that abruptly fades into darkness at the edge of town. Bend, Oregon. Rural areas are interesting not from what is seen, but rather what is not seen at all. San Francisco Bay Area. Miami, Florida. We now have a database of over 4,000 images of cities at night, systematically taken all around the world. Houston, Texas, with a skip of fog. No display from space is complete without at least one image of Houston, where I-45 is visible all the way down to Galveston Island. A mosaic from Los Angeles down the Coast Highway to San Diego. The imprint of culture, geography, and technology allows one from orbit to identify what part of the nighttime world you are over simply from the display of lights below. Our nation's capital, Washington, D.C. Clearly visible is the outline of the District of Columbia. The brightest spot on Earth. Las Vegas, Nevada, our beacon for humanity. We do not construct our cities by how they might look from space. Cities at night may very well be one of the most beautiful, unintentional consequences of humanity. Cities at night, an orbital tour around the world.
So that's basically what I had to show you. So I guess we're going to go to a questions and answer session or panel or.